You think your family has problems? Sibling rivalries, embarrassing uncles? Well, buckle up, because the story of the von Hesburg dynasty makes your family drama look like a picnic at Disney World. Imagine a bloodline so utterly, terrifyingly cursed that every single heir born for generations was marked by a horrifying disfigurement. Not just a simple birthmark, mind you. We're talking about grotesquely twisted limbs, malformed faces, and bodies that seem to defy the very laws of nature, as if sculpted by a malicious, unseen hand. You're about to discover the chilling truth. Behind the von Hesburgs, a tale so dark it makes the most twisted fairy tales seem like lullabies, and the most gruesome horror stories feel like children's fables. From the ancient pact that sealed their fate to desperate, unholy rituals performed in shadowed chapels to break the curse. These are the facts that will make you question everything you thought you knew about inherited misfortune and the lie. True cost of unchecked ambition. This isn't just bad luck. This is a destiny carved in twisted flesh. A generational horror show playing out on the grand stage of European nobility. Let's start at the very beginning, with a faint, unsettling whisper of the curse that would plague them for centuries. The year is 1488. The von Hesburgs are not just any noble family. They are a formidable power in the heart of the fragmented Holy Roman Empire, their influence stretching across fertile valleys and strategic trade routes. Renowned for their vast wealth, their imposing castles, and above all, their ruthless, unyielding ambition, they stood as titans among men. Lord Conrad von Hesburg, the patriarch of this mighty house, embodied these traits more than anyone. A man whose greed knew no bounds, his eyes constantly fixated on expanding his dominion. He coveted a vast stretch of untouched, pristine land. This wasn't just any parcel of earth. It was a sacred territory, long held and fiercely protected by a reclusive ancient sect known only as the Whisperers of the Stone. These were not your typical peasants or isolated monks. They were the last vestiges of an almost forgotten wisdom, guardians of arcane knowledge and protectors of ancient, sacred ground steeped in the very essence of the land. Their existence predated the Hesburgs by millennia, their traditions older than any king. Conrad, however, saw only the untapped resources, the strategic advantage, and the sheer audacity of a handful of people standing in the way of his glorious expansion. Blinded by avarice and an unshakable belief in his divine right to rule, he decided to seize the land by brutal, uncompromising force. He dispatched his elite knights, seasoned veterans hardened by countless skirmishes, with clear, chilling orders. Raze their villages to the ground, desecrate their altars with fire, and steal and murder their elders without mercy. The air was filled with the screams of the innocent, the clash of steel, and the acrid smell of burning wood and flesh. But as the very last elder of the Whisperers drew his dying, ragged breath, his eyes, clouded by death, fixed on Conrad's grinning face. With a voice that seemed to vibrate with the very pain of the earth, he laid a curse upon the von Hesburg name. It was not a curse of immediate death or swift ruin, for that would have been too merciful. Instead, it was something far more insidious, a slow, agonizing decay of their very essence. For every drop of sacred blood spilled, a mark shall be born. Your seed shall be tainted, and every firstborn son in every generation shall reflect the broken harmony you have wrought until the stone finds its rest. Conrad just laughed, a booming, triumphant sound that echoed over the dying embers of the Whisperers' homes. He had no idea, absolutely no inkling, of the profound generational horror he had unleashed upon his own bloodline. He saw only his newly acquired lands, his expanding empire. His devoted wife, the gentle Lady Alara, gave birth to their first son, Albrecht, a mere year later. The birthing chamber, usually a place of joyous expectation, was instead filled with the horrified gasps and then outright screams of the midwives. Albrecht was born with a face so profoundly asymmetrical, it looked as if two different halves had been crudely, monstrously stitched together from different beings. One eye was alarmingly wider and more protruding than the other, his jaw severely misaligned, giving his young face a perpetual, unsettling twist. A deep, purplish-black birthmark, resembling a bruise from some cosmic blow, covered half his face like a grotesque living mask. Conrad, initially stunned, quickly dismissed it as an unfortunate anomaly, a rare, inexplicable birth defect, a bad omen quickly forgotten amidst the glittering celebration of his new wealth and power. But then came his second son, and then his third, and the horrifying, undeniable pattern repeated itself with terrifying consistency. Each subsequent male heir, each precious firstborn, bore a unique, profound disfigurement that marked them as different as cursed. One child had limbs that twisted like ancient, gnarled trees, impossibly bent at angles that defied human anatomy. Another's spine was so severely contorted he could barely stand upright, forced to move with a perpetual, crab-like shuffle. The family, initially in denial, then in shame, tried desperately to hide them away, keeping them in shadowed nurseries and rarely allowing them into public view. But the whispers began, first among the servants, then spreading like wildfire through the local villages and beyond. The peasants, superstitious and terrified, called it the devil's mark, a divine punishment for some unspeakable sin, a visible sign of God's wrath upon the proud von Hesburg name. The von Hesburgs, once respected and even revered, became an object of morbid fascination, whispered about with a mix of fear and dark amusement. You don't learn this in history classes, because such matters were often hushed up and removed from official chronicles. But some contemporary accounts from neighboring duchies and hidden monastic records suggest the disfigurements worsened with each passing generation. It was as if the curse itself was a living entity, festering, growing stronger, sinking its roots deeper into the very genetic fabric of the family with every new birth, ensuring its grotesque manifestation was more pronounced, more disturbing. The once proud and beautiful von Hesburg lineage was slowly, inexorably becoming a horrifying gallery of human deformities, a living testament to an ancient transgression. The shadow of the curse stretched long, casting a pall over every birth, every celebration, every aspiration of the von Hesburg name. The curse of the von Hesburgs wasn't merely a physical affliction. It was a profound psychological torture that seeped into and permeated every single aspect of their gilded, yet utterly miserable, lives. Imagine for a moment being born into immense, almost unimaginable wealth and power, surrounded by servants, fine silks, and bountiful feasts, only to be immediately hidden away, considered a source of profound shame, a grotesque, living secret that must never see the light of day. This wasn't just about disfigured bodies. It was about disfigured lives, individual spirits twisted and warped by generations of societal fear, relentless pressure, and the family's desperate, often cruel, attempts to maintain a facade of normalcy and perfection. The women who married into the von Hesburg line, particularly the wives of the lords, had it even worse than you could possibly imagine. They were not just expected to produce an heir, the paramount duty of any noble woman, but they were expected, nay, demanded, to produce a normal, unblemished heir, an utterly impossible task given the curse. If the firstborn arrived with the dreaded disfigurement, the mother often faced a lifetime of unbearable guilt, public shaming, even if hidden from the common folk, and sometimes even a worse fate, confinement to a remote tower, exile, or worse, treated as if they themselves had somehow brought the curse upon the family, regardless of their absolute innocence. The immense, crushing pressure to break the curse, to finally produce an heir untouched by the family blight, led to increasingly desperate, depraved, and ultimately futile measures within the von Hesburg household. The women lived in a state of perpetual, agonizing terror during their pregnancies. When a von Hesburg bride conceived, the entire household, from the lowest scullery maid to the highest-ranking advisor, held its breath. The silence in the castle during these months was deafening, punctuated only by nervous coughs and the rustle of silks. Whispers of, "Will it be marked this time?" or "Will God finally show mercy?" filled the hushed halls, carrying the weight of centuries of despair. If the child arrived with the dreaded disfigurement, the cries of the newborn were often drowned out by the muffled sobs of the mother and the sighs of resignation from the family elders. One particularly tragic case was that of Lady Isolde, the gentle, pious wife of the stern Lord Valerius von Hesburg. Her first son, little Maximilian, was born with a chilling facial anomaly, a complete absence of pigmentation in one eye, leaving it a startling, blood-red orb that seemed to glow malevolently in the dim light of the birthing chamber, while the other eye remained a normal, placid blue. A contrast was horrifying, a truly unsettling spectacle. Poor Isolde, already weakened by childbirth, was immediately accused of infidelity, of consorting with demons, of somehow bringing this fresh blight upon the family through her own sin. She spent the rest of her miserable days confined to a remote, seldom visited wing of the sprawling castle, her only company the disfigured son she was forced to nurse, a constant living reminder of the curse and her perceived failure. She slowly withered away, consumed by guilt and isolation. The von Hesburgs, desperate to escape their grotesque fate, became increasingly obsessed with finding cures. They scoured the known world, consulting every charlatan alchemist, every backwoods witch doctor, every self-proclaimed holy man, and every learned scholar across Europe, regardless of their reputation or the morality of their practices. From bathing in the grotesque, barbaric blood of virgins, a truly abhorrent ritual that left a trail of innocent, terrified victims across their lands, to consuming powdered unicorn horns, often just ground animal bone, but believed to hold magical properties. No ritual was too dark, no price too high, no act too heinous if it promised even the faintest glimmer of hope. One particularly bizarre and utterly horrifying ritual, whispered about only in the darkest corners of the castle, involved burying the disfigured newborn alive for a single night within consecrated ground, believing that the earth itself would cleanse the curse from their flesh. Many of these innocent infants perished, suffocating or succumbing to the cold and fear in their tiny makeshift graves. But the few who, by some miracle or twist of fate, survived and were unearthed the next morning, emerged even more profoundly, marked, bearing not only their original birth deformity, but also the fresh scars of their attempted cure, frostbite, infections, and a haunted, vacant look in their eyes. The von Hesburgs, driven by paranoia and shame, began to construct an elaborate network of hidden passages, secret stairwells, and concealed chambers within their sprawling, labyrinthine castles. These weren't built for defense or convenience, but specifically to conceal the grotesque, living evidence of their cursed lineage. The firstborn sons, the most visibly marked by the curse, were raised in almost complete isolation, tutored by devoted but terrified servants sworn to secrecy, rarely seeing the light of day or the horrified faces of their parents. They were living, breathing monuments to the curse, a legacy of hidden horrors that festered and expanded within the very stone walls of their ancestral home, silently screaming of the family's dark past and their inescapable future. You don't learn this in your sanitized history classes, but court records from neighboring duchies and the diaries of visiting dignitaries occasionally mention strange, heavily hooded and cloaked figures seen traveling with the von Hesburg retinue, their disfigured heirs, bundled and concealed in the depths of carriages, permitted brief, shielded glimpses of the outside world through heavily curtained windows, a chilling testament to the family's deep-seated shame, profound fear, and the unyielding grip of the curse, the von Hesburg's desperate attempts to break. The curse escalated from barbaric rituals and desperate pleas to a chilling, almost mad scientific obsession. If you thought their cures were deranged and inhumane, wait until you hear about their private laboratories, hidden deep within the labyrinthine bowels of their castles. This family didn't just seek a remedy. They attempted to dissect the very essence of life and death, to unravel the fabric of creation itself, all to save their tainted bloodline from its grotesque fate. The vast wealth of the von Hesburgs, once used to build formidable fortresses and finance political machinations, was now funneled into increasingly unholy, morally reprehensible experimentation. They became convinced that if they could understand the precise biological or alchemical mechanism of the curse, they could surely reverse it, no matter the cost in lives, sanity, or moral rectitude. Their pursuit of a cure became an all-consuming madness. Their once grand, opulent castles, particularly the ancient seat of Castle Hesburg, became veritable grotesque scientific facilities. The family began methodically collecting, documenting, and meticulously studying the disfigurements of their past heirs. Every birth, every deformity, was catalogued with chilling precision. They commissioned intricate, disturbing anatomical drawings of their deceased deformed children, sometimes even preserving their skeletal remains or organs, all in a macabre attempt to find a pattern, a key to unlock the curse's secret. They hired a shadowy retinue of disgraced doctors, excommunicated alchemists, and even professional grave robbers, luring them with promises of untold riches and absolute secrecy. These dark practitioners were tasked with bringing them specimens, not just from their own cursed bloodline, but from other unfortunates, born with congenital defects across the land, hoping to find a common thread, a universal flaw they could exploit or fix. Imagine their once vibrant dining halls, where kings and queens once feasted, now converted into silent, antiseptic dissection tables, draped in white cloths and stained with ominous fluids. Their grand libraries, once filled with illuminated manuscripts and theological treatises, were now crammed with forbidden anatomical diagrams, arcane texts on necromancy, and whispered formulas for the transmutation of flesh. The very air in the deepest, most secure cellars of Castle Hesburg reeked not of fine wine or aging parchment, but of formaldehyde, putrid reagents, and the pervasive scent of fear. Here's where it gets truly bizarre and frankly horrifying. Driven by the increasingly desperate belief that the curse might be a physical entity, a poison residing within the very blood of their lineage, some von Hesburg lords subjected their pregnant wives to extreme, agonizingly dangerous treatments. They would administer vile concoctions of rare, often toxic herbs, ground minerals derived from dark earths, and even what they mistakenly believed to be purified animal blood, harvested from freshly slaughtered beasts or worse. Many of these poor, suffering women miscarried in agonizing pain, their bodies racked by convulsions and fever. Others gave birth to stillborn children, some with even more horrifying, inexplicable deformities than those born naturally, as if the treatments themselves were twisting the curse into something new and more terrible. One particularly fanatical lord, convinced that the curse was carried in the very spirit or aura of the family, engaged in nightly rituals of spiritual cleansing, involving prolonged, punishing fasts that drove him to the brink of starvation, ritualistic self-flagellation that left his back a bloody mess, and increasingly dangerous attempts to summon benevolent spirits, or indeed, malevolent ones if they promised even a hint of a cure. These dark, desperate practices often ended not in a cure, but in madness for the participants, if not outright death. This obsession manifested even in their architecture. The von Hesburg lords driven by their secretive and dangerous pursuits, had sections of their castles redesigned with multiple layers of hidden walls, secret compartments, and concealed ventilation shafts. These weren't just for hiding the disfigured heirs. They were specifically constructed for conducting clandestine, unspeakable experiments in absolute, impenetrable secrecy. These rooms were often meticulously soundproofed, with complex, elaborate ventilation systems designed to carry away the telltale stench of their grisly work, the scent of chemicals, decay, and fear. He even suspected his own living lineage, including his children, of carrying other hidden illnesses or predispositions that might be linked to curse. So he forced them to undergo bizarre purification treatments, ingesting strange, bitter liquids, enduring painful ritualistic scarifications, or being subjected to long periods of sensory deprivation, all in the name of ensuring a pure air. You don't learn this in history classes, of course, because such atrocities were meticulously covered up. But whispers among the surviving texts of the Whisperers of the Stone hint at a reciprocal magic, a chilling theory that the von Hesburghs' very attempts to break the curse were unknowingly feeding it, twisting the ancient magic further, and ensuring its increasingly grotesque manifestation in each subsequent generation. The truly insane part? Even as their increasingly deranged efforts yielded only more horror, more disfigurement, and more death, the von Hesburghs kept pushing, convinced that their royal status, their immense wealth, their supposed intellectual superiority somehow made them immune to the ultimate consequences of tampering with forces beyond human comprehension. Their boundless obsession was their ultimate undoing, a slow, agonizing self-destruction. The curse of the von Hesburghs wasn't just a persistent evil that clung to their bloodline. It was an insidious entity that adapted, evolving with each passing generation, ensuring its continuation with chilling precision. You'd think after centuries of such profound generational horror, the family would finally break, or the curse would simply dissipate into the annals of forgotten history, right? Wrong. This bloodline was so utterly inextricably entwined with its misfortune, with the malevolent force unleashed by its ancestor, that even its eventual demise was marked by the lingering shadow of disfigurement, despair, and an almost supernatural chaos. The ancient unholy contract sealed by their founder held fast, twisting fate with relentless, merciless precision until the very end dot by the late 17th century. The once mighty von Hesburghs were a mere shadow of their former glory. Their immense wealth, once vast enough to rival kings, had been squandered on a seemingly endless succession of failed cures, dubious alchemical experiments, and the desperate, crushing secrecy surrounding their ever-increasingly disfigured heirs. The constant hiding, the perpetual fear of exposure, and the moral rot caused by their horrific practices had bred a profound, almost genetic paranoia within the family itself. Lord Elias von Hesburgh, the last undisputed male heir to the cursed line, was himself a horrific living testament to the curse's ultimate triumph. Born with a face so sunken and skeletal it resembled a death's head, and hands that ended in only two fused, gnarled fingers, he was a living nightmare, a ghastly silhouette moving through the ancient castle halls. His paranoia wasn't just your typical noble distrust. It was a deeply ingrained, almost pathological suspicion that everyone, even his closest, most loyal advisors, was trying to expose or exploit his grotesque deformity, to mock his suffering. Let's start with his final agonizing days. Elias was so reclusive, so consumed by shame and fear, that he conducted all his business from behind a heavily embroidered screen, communicating only through trusted, sworn-to-secrecy servants whose faces he never saw. He absolutely refused to let anyone see him eat, fearing that even a fleeting glimpse of his contorted features would provoke disgust, mockery, and further gossip that could undermine his precarious authority. His food was prepared in absolute, ritualistic secrecy within heavily guarded, sealed kitchens, tasted by multiple, meticulously screened servants, each undergoing daily loyalty oaths, and delivered by muffled, veiled figures who dared not meet. His eyes. He slept with armed guards stationed inside his very bedroom, not primarily to protect him from assassins, but to ensure that no one, not even in his sleep, saw him without his elaborate, concealing garments and his ever-present heavy cowl. The castle itself became a tomb, not just for the family's dark secrets, but for Elias's very existence, a living monument to his profound isolation and fear. Here's where it gets truly unsettling and utterly bizarre. Elias, convinced that the curse was a physical contagion, a malevolent entity trapped within his very flesh, made bizarre and specific demands for his burial. He ordered his body to be embalmed, not with traditional methods, but with a complex, arcane mixture of ancient resins, rare salts, and mysterious oils, intended to seal the curse and its physical manifestation within his decaying flesh forever. His coffin was to be triple-lined with thick sheets of lead and iron, not just for preservation, but with the explicit instruction that it was to contain the corrupted essence of his bloodline, to prevent it from escaping and infecting the world. He was to be buried in a secret, heavily reinforced crypt beneath the family chapel, accessible only by a hidden passage that would be sealed forever with molten lead and solid stone after his interment. They meticulously followed his instructions, convinced they were finally putting the curse to rest. They were very, very wrong. During the final, grim sealing of his crypt, witnessed only by a handful of terrified masons, grim-faced priests, and Elias's most loyal, and perhaps equally terrified, retainers, something absolutely incredible and deeply chilling happened. Reports from the few survivors, passed down through hushed whispers for generations, speak of a chilling, guttural groan, deep and resonant, emanating from within the freshly sealed tomb. Then, a foul, sulfuric stench, like something dredged, from the deepest pits of the earth, erupted from cracks in the newly laid stone, so overwhelmingly putrid that several of the men collapsed, retching violently, their faces green with sickness. It was as if the curse itself, trapped with its last host, was screaming its defiance, its rage at being confined. The crypt was instantly resealed with extra layers of mortar and stone, hastily, desperately, but the incident spread like wildfire among the locals, becoming a terrifying legend. Peasants whispered of the devil's breath escaping the von Hesburg tomb, a final, putrid exhalation of the curse, a last gasp of its malevolence. You don't learn this in history classes out there, because such events were carefully erased from official records and considered superstition. But for years afterward, strange occurrences plagued the remnants of the von Hesburg estate. Shadows were seen flitting through the decaying castle windows, distorted reflections in forgotten, stagnant pools, and a persistent, faint odor of decay and sulfur lingered in the air, especially during new moons or when the mist rolled in from the surrounding forests. Some claimed it was the restless, tormented spirits of the disfigured heirs, unable to find peace even in death. More practically, historians suggest it was likely the lingering stench of the decaying corpse and the profound psychological impact of centuries of terror on the local populace. Elias's death, marked by this final grotesque incident, marked the true end of the direct male line, and with no normal, uncursed heirs to continue the name, the von Hesburg dynasty simply faded into obscurity, their once magnificent castles eventually falling into ruin, silent, crumbling witnesses to their horrific, unforgettable legacy. So there you have it, the real unvarnished story of the von Hesburgs. Not a simple tale of bad genetics or unfortunate luck, but a horrifying saga of ancient curses, desperate and depraved measures, and the chilling reality of a bloodline forever marked by an unforgivable act of greed and desecration. A once proud family so utterly consumed by its own disfigurement both physical and moral, that it twisted itself into something genuinely monstrous. Their legacy isn't just ruined castles and forgotten names. It's a masterclass in how a single act of unchecked ambition can unleash a generational horror that even death cannot fully contain, a curse that clung to them like a second skin. If these disturbing, horrifying historical facts made you question everything you thought you knew about misfortune, fate, and the true cost of power, maybe hit that subscribe button, because there are plenty more horrifying truths the textbooks conveniently leave out. And trust me, you haven't heard anything yet.